Hey guys, tonight we're taking a dreamy little stroll back, way back, to ancient Sumer, where the night air is thick with incense, sandals slap softly against packed dirt, and the glow of oil lamps flickers on clay walls. You're standing in the cradle of civilization, which, depending on your opinion of bureaucrats, is either a magical place of innovation, or the place that cursed humanity with receipts. You probably won't survive this, cognitively, at least, without falling asleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along the edges of the Tigris River, barefoot, your feet sinking gently into damp soil. It's somewhere around 3200 BCE, and the city-state of Uruk is stirring. The hum of early urban life surrounds you, bleating sheep, clanging bronze, and the soft mutter of scribes arguing about inventory. You pass a herd of goats that smells, exactly how you'd expect a herd of goats to smell, and someone is yelling in Sumerian about a delivery gone wrong. Already, the air buzzes with transactions. You might think receipts are boring, your modern ones certainly are, but here, they're alive. They start as tiny clay tokens, each shaped to represent a commodity, a cone for a measure of grain, a disc for a sheep, a little hollow sphere for oil. Simple. Physical. No paper, no pens. Just your hands, clay, and memory. The world's first accountants didn't sit in air-conditioned offices, they knelt in dust and made sure no one forgot how many goats they owed the temple. Historians still argue whether this token system began purely for trade or if it was rooted in religious ritual. Some claim it was the temples themselves, economic powerhouses in these cities, that created the need to track offerings. Imagine handing over 10 jars of honey and just trusting a sleepy priest to remember. That's how you get divine audits and very mortal frustrations. You walk past a low wall where a man is carefully placing small tokens into a clay envelope. Not a metaphor, an actual hollow clay sphere, into which he's inserting shaped pieces. When he's done, he seals it with a thumbprint and a simple mark. It's a record. If you ever need to check what's inside, well, you smash it open. Kind of like an ancient piñata of economic anxiety. The beauty of this token system is its tactile simplicity. You don't need to read. You just need to count. Each shape means something. Add them together, and voila, you've got a transactional memory. These weren't just casual tools either, they were official, often used in temple or palace economies. Big stuff, not just grocery lists. You notice a woman arguing over the count of tokens, her hands flap in exasperation while the scribe calmly rechecks the contents. It's oddly familiar. You've been in that line at a coffee shop, haven't you? When your order's wrong but the receipt says otherwise? The Sumerians didn't stop there, though. Over time, they began pressing the token's shapes into flat pieces of clay instead of sealing them away. It was more efficient, more permanent. Why hide the info when you can show your math? From here, the logic practically slides downhill into writing. Receipts, of all things, may have been the trigger for the first true script. Let that sink in, the most profound invention of human civilization, writing, may have emerged not to tell stories or share poetry, but to make sure someone got credit for those 6 baskets of barley. The world turns on wheat and suspicion. And that suspicion? It's justified. Trade is expanding. Markets are popping up. People are moving from bartering in the street to structured, temple-monitored exchanges. Imagine walking up to a kiosk, handing over some lentils, and getting a lump of clay in return. Not thrilling, maybe, but it's what trust looks like in 3000 BCE. You duck into a small room, a sort of proto-office, where a young boy is being trained by an elder in how to press tokens into a tablet. The elder is half asleep, muttering about last week's ox inventory, while the boy tentatively pushes shapes into the clay. His tongue sticks out a little. It's adorable, and also, wildly historical. Here's a fun tidbit: many of the earliest tokens are found with tiny holes in them, possibly for stringing together. Like a prehistoric receipt lanyard. Chic and functional. You might even call it primitive bling. The system's not flawless, though. Some tokens are ambiguous. A cone can mean different things depending on context. And as the economy becomes more complex, so does the need for precision. Historians still debate whether this push toward more specific tokens was gradual or revolutionary. Either way, it leads to the birth of abstract symbols, a leap from physical shapes to drawn signs. You squint at one token lying in the dirt. It's worn, smoothed by centuries, but still identifiable. This little object helps someone track a transaction. And now it's just sitting here. Forgotten but somehow eternal. There's a quiet dignity in it. As you leave the market square, the sounds of trade fade into the warm, golden hush of evening. Lamps flicker. A scribe tucks away a day's work in a shelf, rows of sealed envelopes and stamped tokens. A proto-filing system. Efficient, confusing, and deeply human. You settle down beside a clay wall, lulled by the chirping of insects and the far-off bleat of one very opinionated goat. Receipts, it turns out, are older than you thought. And stranger. But we're only just beginning. You blink slowly in the fading warmth of the Sumerian twilight, the sweet, earthy scent of clay mingling with roasted grains drifting from a nearby oven. But you're not here for snacks. Not yet. Instead, your feet take you toward a raised platform in the center of Uruk, a ziggurat looming like a layered cake of baked brick and holy authority. This isn't just a religious site. It's the beating economic heart of the city. Welcome to Temple Economics 101. Here, gods and spreadsheets collide. Or, more precisely, priests and balance sheets. You step into a courtyard bustling with activity. Offerings are being catalogued, livestock are herded for inspection, and scribes, so many scribes, sit cross-legged beside low tables, recording every movement of goods. The line between religion and accounting is blurrier than the edge of a poorly baked clay tablet. The temple isn't just a spiritual center, it's a warehouse, a bank, a job agency, and possibly a very controlling neighborhood association. People bring offerings of food, livestock, oil, and fabric, not only to appease the gods, but to pay taxes, wages, or debts. And these priests? They don't just chant prayers, they track every single delivery. One mistake, and someone's god gets hungry. You peek into a side room where a priest is examining a jar of sesame oil like it holds the secrets of the universe. He gives a satisfied grunt and nods at a scribe, who immediately presses symbols into a small clay tablet, your ancient equivalent of a digital receipt. It's a record that the oil was delivered, inspected, and accepted. Somewhere, an offering ledger just updated. Ding. Historians still argue whether these temples truly owned the economy or merely facilitated it. Some claim the temples functioned more like socialist collectives, redistributing goods among workers and the poor. Others see them as power-hungry megacorporations hoarding wealth in the name of Inanna and friends. Either way, it's clear that religious institutions in Sumer weren't just interested in your soul, they wanted your grain, too. As you walk through the temple storehouses, rows of clay jars tower above you like ancient security deposit boxes. Each one is tagged with a lump of clay, imprinted with symbols that record contents, date, and who donated or delivered it. Nothing leaves or enters unmarked. You start to realize that the first receipts weren't just about transactions. They were about trust, control, and divine record-keeping. One quirky practice you notice involves tracking offerings with sacrificial animals. The temple doesn't just accept a sheep, it documents the sheep's age, condition, and source. You see a scribe muttering to himself as he sketches a surprisingly accurate sheep head into the margin of his clay tablet. Early animal emojis? Maybe. A bored scribe's doodle? Probably. You pause near a group of workers receiving their wages. There's no payday cash here, payment comes in kind. Each worker steps forward, receives a carefully measured jug of beer or basket of barley, and signs off, well, not with a signature, but with an impressed symbol confirming they've received what they're owed. You can't help but notice how each scribe uses a different style. Some press deep, sharp marks, others are more delicate, almost artistic. Even now, human handwriting leaves its mark. One man jokes with the scribe about forgetting his extra beer from last week. The scribe just raises an eyebrow and gestures to a tablet nearby. The tablet doesn't lie. The beer was accounted for. Case closed. You nod in appreciation. Ancient HR has receipts. Here's a little fringe theory you overhear. Some archaeologists think temple scribes developed rudimentary profit tracking. Not in the capitalist sense, but in the divine balance sheet sense. If offerings exceeded temple expenditures, it meant the gods were pleased, or at least well-fed. If deficits occurred, the priests might divine some bad omens or introduce new rituals, conveniently involving more donations. It's speculative, but fun to imagine an ancient priest anxiously flipping through tablets, muttering, "We're in the red. Better sacrifice 2 goats this week." As you meander further, a soft humming fills the air. It's a melodic chant, low and rhythmic. You peek around a column and see a priestess standing before a tablet, reciting what sounds like an inventory list in song. It's beautiful, and just a bit absurd. Singing receipts. There's something oddly modern about turning dull bureaucracy into performance art. Broadway, but make it Sumerian. The sun dips lower, casting golden light across the baked brick floors. You find yourself at the temple's edge, near a quiet corner stacked with rejected tablets, broken, smeared, or miswritten. The ancient equivalent of crumpled-up drafts or that forgotten spreadsheet version named final2_editrial.xlsx. You crouch down and pick one up. It's still warm from the sun. The symbols etched into its surface are faint but decipherable, something about a barley offering gone missing. A line is crossed out and rewritten. Maybe someone tried to fudge a number. Maybe they were just tired. It's comforting to know even ancient accountants made mistakes. One last detail catches your eye, a tablet with a waxy substance smeared across its face. Not wax, though, it's leftover bitumen, a kind of tar used to seal items or mark special importance. This tablet must have been a contract, maybe a debt agreement. The seal has been broken, which means the contract was fulfilled, or destroyed. Either way, someone walked away with a sigh of relief and a clean record. As the lamps are lit and temple gates close for the evening, you stretch your arms and yawn. The priests retreat to their chambers, and the scribes tuck their tablets away in shelves and cubbies. It's not flashy. It's not dramatic. But what you've just witnessed is the start of economic order. The beginnings of trust made tangible. A world learning to document, calculate, and, eventually, tax you with eerie precision. You lean against a wall, half asleep, wondering whether your next paycheck could come in jars of sesame oil. Honestly? Not the worst system. The sky is still a soft blue-gray as you rise the next morning, the city of Uruk gently stirring around you. You rub a bit of sleep from your eyes, stretch your legs, and follow a narrow path winding away from the temple. Today, you're chasing receipts older than writing itself, yes, really. Before styluses, before cuneiform, before anyone doodled a single wedge into wet clay, there were strings. And tokens. And envelopes that didn't involve licking any paper. You arrive at a small settlement just outside the main city, where a trader is preparing for a journey. He's crouched over a flat surface, arranging small clay objects, tokens, each shaped differently, each with its own silent meaning. A cone, a sphere, a little ovoid lump. This is prehistoric accounting, circa 8000 BCE. 8,000 years before Excel ruined your life. You watch as he wraps a handful of these tokens in a cloth and tucks them into a pouch. This is his proof of payment. His ledger. No numbers, no words. Just shapes. Each token represents a commodity, one for grain, another for oil, another for animals. It's a system built on collective memory and mutual agreement. The original analog blockchain, if you like your metaphors unnecessarily modern. The fringe theory here. Some historians suggest these tokens weren't just for trade. They may have also served religious or symbolic functions, tiny idols of commerce, so to speak. Others push back, arguing that their consistent shapes and materials point to practical use above all. Historians still argue whether these objects were tools of daily trade or something closer to ceremonial markers of wealth and offering. Either way, they set the stage for everything that came next. What's fascinating is how many of these tokens survive. Thousands have been excavated across the Fertile Crescent, often found in clusters near early storage buildings. It's as if someone tried to clean out a Bronze Age junk drawer and got distracted for 5,000 years. But the real leap? Sealing the tokens in a clay envelope, what archaeologists call a bulla. You stumble upon a half-broken one in a dusty courtyard. It fits in your hand, surprisingly heavy, with a faint impression of a thumbprint near the seal. Once filled with tokens, the envelope would be closed, sealed, and sometimes marked with an identifying stamp. It's a security feature, tamper-proof, or at least tamper-evident. Want to check the contents? You have to break the bulla. You feel like Indiana Jones holding one, just slower, sleepier, and significantly more curious about commodity inventories than golden idols. One clever innovation you spot is this: some scribes began pressing the shape of each token onto the outside of the envelope before sealing it. That way, you wouldn't have to smash it open just to double-check what was inside. This little change, this gentle nudge toward symbolic representation, is one of the first baby steps toward writing. You're literally watching humanity realize, oh hey, maybe we could just draw the thing instead of putting the thing inside. It's both mind-blowing and deeply relatable. You've done the same thing with your moving boxes. Labels help. A family nearby is preparing their own tokens. The wife counts them out while her partner shapes fresh ones by hand. A child pokes one with a stick, giggling as she adds her own version, a tiny lump that, frankly, looks more like a confused potato than anything else. You smile. Some things are universal. These early receipts were profoundly tied to agriculture. You follow the couple to a small granary, where they deposit bags of barley. In return, a temple official hands over a sealed bulla, confirmation that the deposit was made. It's not money. Not exactly. But it functions as a kind of claim ticket. Come back later, bring your bulla, and reclaim your grain. Assuming, of course, the grain is still there and the gods haven't demanded an emergency offering. You examine a collection of clay envelopes stacked neatly on a shelf, each marked with a cylinder seal impression. These seals, carved with intricate designs and rolled across the clay, served as signatures. No two were exactly alike. Some showed animals, some showed gods, some showed men hunting lions with what looked suspiciously like too much confidence. These seals weren't just decorative, they were identity in object form. One particularly lovely seal catches your eye. It shows a man pouring something into a jar while a woman watches, arms crossed, unimpressed. It's possibly the oldest depiction of someone being scolded for not measuring the olive oil correctly. You walk past a merchant caravan preparing to leave. As goods are loaded, jars, baskets, textiles, someone pulls out a clay envelope, cracks it open with a little tap on the corner, and spills the tokens onto a flat stone. A quick count. A nod. The trade goes forward. It's quick, efficient, and trustworthy, at least until someone forgets to pack the figs. Quirky fact for you, there's evidence some of these early tokens were kept on strings and worn around the neck or wrist, sort of like a wearable accounting system. Imagine a bracelet where each bead means, I owe you 2 chickens. Fashionable and functional. As the sun rises higher, you wander through an open-air market. You see one merchant bartering with another, goats for fish, perhaps. No coins, no credit cards, just a little pile of tokens and mutual nods of agreement. It's a handshake economy with a side of clay. One older man mutters as he organizes his envelopes. He's worried about losing them. Without those sealed records, disputes can't be resolved. In a world without writing, memory fades quickly, and having proof is everything. You start to understand how deeply these tokens mattered, not just for trade, but for trust. The air grows hotter. Dust swirls. You find yourself back under the shade of a tree, your pockets metaphorically full of cone-shaped memories and goat-themed promises. This little experiment in object-based bookkeeping seems simple, even quaint. But it carries the weight of civilization on its stubby little shoulders. You close your eyes and think about how these tiny tokens, these strange clay shapes, represent not just goods, but the very first flickers of abstract thought. This is proto-literacy. This is the spreadsheet before the screen. This is how we taught ourselves to remember, long before we taught ourselves to read. You shift gently beneath the shelter of a woven reed awning, the scent of sun-warmed mud thick in the air. It's midday now, and in ancient Mesopotamia, that means it's time to rest in the shade, or, if you're a scribe, to write like your life depends on it. Because now, finally, the tokens are getting lazy. Or, more accurately, the people are getting clever. Why carry a pouch of 20 clay tokens when you can press all that information into a single surface? Welcome to the invention of writing, my friend. Hope you brought your stylus. You find yourself beside a small, dim workshop. Inside, young apprentices sit hunched over flat clay tablets, styluses gripped like tiny spears of destiny. One mispress and it's back to smoothing the surface and starting again. You crouch beside one boy whose tongue sticks out as he focuses, slowly, deliberately pressing wedge-shaped marks into the clay. It's hypnotic, really. Tap tap drag. Tap tap poke. These marks are cuneiform, the earliest known system of writing. And like most things in civilization, it started not with poetry, but with receipts. Cuneiform literally means wedge-shaped, and you can see why. The stylus, often a trimmed reed, makes angular impressions that look almost geometric. At first glance, it might seem like gibberish to you, rows of marks, triangles, and slashes. But look closer. Each symbol tells a story. Not of gods or heroes. Not yet. These are stories of sheep, jars of oil, sacks of grain, and who owes what to whom. It's business, baby. The most ancient kind. And here's the kicker, we didn't jump straight from speech to writing. There was a long, awkward teenage phase in between, when writing didn't represent words, but things. This is what scholars call proto-cuneiform. Think pictograms, a symbol for barley, a symbol for water, a symbol for a human head that probably means person or worker. But rather than stringing them into sentences, they just stack them in lists. You're not telling stories, you're tallying stuff. You peer at an early tablet on a nearby shelf. It's not flat, it's convex, like a little hand mirror made of mud. The symbols are arranged in neat columns. This one records a shipment of livestock. You squint at a tiny symbol that resembles a starfish trying to run. That's a sheep. At least, you hope it's a sheep. Someone in antiquity clearly decided abstract art was the way forward. The fascinating twist. These early pictograms evolved from the token system. Scholars believe people began pressing tokens directly into clay tablets, then drawing them instead, then simplifying the drawings into marks. The whole system slowly morphed from 3D to 2D to abstract code. Historians still argue whether this shift was driven by practicality, storage concerns, or sheer laziness, but whatever the reason, the outcome was enormous. The first scribes didn't aim to preserve culture or language, they just wanted to keep track of who owed how many goats. That's your grand origin story. Not romance. Not myth. But accounting. We invented writing to make sure Bob didn't skip out on his barley payment again. You reach for a stylus yourself and test it on a fresh slab. The clay is cool and firm, with just enough give. You press a symbol for fish and immediately regret it. It looks more like a dropped sandal. But no one's judging. The real scribes didn't get good overnight either. Most train from childhood, spending years memorizing hundreds of signs, numbers, and combinations. It's like ancient grad school, but with more sunburn and fewer coffee breaks. Want a quirky fact? Cuneiform numerals are weirdly inconsistent. The Sumerians used a base 60 system, sexagesimal, which is why we still have 60 minutes in an hour and 360 degrees in a circle. But their number system mixed base 10 and base 60 symbols, depending on the context. You'd need a calculator, an abacus, and probably a small prayer to get through a tax form. And yet, they managed just fine. As you wander farther into the workshop, you notice the shift happening right before your eyes. One apprentice is copying symbols that clearly aren't pictograms anymore, they're abstract signs, each representing syllables or even full words. Writing is evolving. It's no longer just counting. It's becoming language. Scribes are starting to write people's names, places, even contracts. One cracked tablet on the floor catches your eye. It's a labor agreement between a landowner and a farmhand, recording the number of workdays owed, and the payment to be received in grain and beer. It even includes a clause about failure to show up. You chuckle. The first HR disputes were written in clay. Historians still argue whether these contracts were fully binding or merely ceremonial. Some think they were more like glorified reminders. Others argue that the presence of a seal and witness marks gave them legal heft. Either way, they reflect an increasingly complex society, one where trust wasn't enough, and written proof became the new standard. You notice something charming: among the official tablets, there are practice ones. Some are filled with wobbly symbols, scratched out and rewritten. One shows what looks like a very crooked goat and the word beer repeated 10 times. You suspect a bored student was dreaming of the weekend. That, or inventing the world's first meme. At the back of the workshop, a master scribe sits alone, carving not into clay but into a small stone. It's slow, deliberate work. Not for everyday use. This is ceremonial. Permanent. A record that matters. The scribe pauses, inspects the lines, and adds one final wedge. You have the sense that someone, thousands of years later, might read this. Might wonder about the person who wrote it. Might imagine a quiet afternoon, the buzz of flies, the scrape of reed on stone, and the sound of clay softly squishing under ancient hands. The light outside begins to shift again, casting long shadows across the clay-streaked floor. You step outside, squinting into the sun, mind swimming with symbols and sounds. Writing. Born not from inspiration, but from barley shipments and livestock tallies. It's humble. It's practical. And it's utterly revolutionary. You walk back toward the city's edge, passing rows of drying tablets, each one whispering, "Someone was here. Someone remembered this." And you, drifting in their footsteps, remember too. You stroll lazily along a dusty road leading out of the city center, toes curling slightly in the warm, soft silt. A breeze stirs the hem of your robe, well, tunic, if we're staying historically accurate, and brings with it the smell of baked brick and sweet date wine. It's been a full day, and you're still chasing the roots of paperwork. But now, you're going deeper than clay. Because tonight, you're headed to a place that doesn't just record goods, it stores them. You're entering the temple economy. Don't worry. There's no sermon, no altar call. Just thousands of tons of grain, oil, and wool, tracked by one of the most mind-bending bureaucracies humanity ever devised. Welcome to the House of Heaven, better known to scribes as the ultimate data center of the ancient world. The ziggurat of Uruk rises in the distance, a layered pyramid of sun-baked bricks that glows peachy orange in the setting light. But you're not going to the top, not yet. Your path winds to the lower levels, where rows of storerooms and offices hum with the quiet rhythm of temple life, or at least give you a bad case of public side-eye. Historians still argue whether the temple economy was a purely religious institution or a clever way to centralize control under the guise of divine management. Was it faith or finance driving these operations? The answer, of course, is probably yes. As you move between storage rooms, you hear the soft clatter of styluses tapping clay. Scribes sit at low benches, recording incoming goods from local farms. Each load is weighed using stone balances and copper weights. You spot a set of standard weights, shaped like ducks and lions, adorable and deadly serious. Imagine a tax collector handing you a tiny duck and saying, "This is how we measure your loyalty to Inanna." One man arrives with 3 donkeys, each carrying a bulging sack. A scribe approaches, inspects the load, and scribbles notes on a tablet. The farmer nods as the temple clerk presses his seal into the corner. Transaction complete. No signatures. Just mud and muscle memory. Here's a quirky tidbit: temple staff weren't just religious figures. They included brewers, weavers, shepherds, and cooks, all paid in rations and tracked with obsessive precision. You might be hauling water one day and weaving ceremonial robes the next, all depending on what the gods, or more likely, the temple managers, needed. The scent of roasted barley wafts in from a nearby courtyard. You follow your nose and discover a small brewery. Giant vats bubble over open flames. Temple brewed beer wasn't just for parties. It was a standard part of worker compensation. One laborer waves his ration tablet at the brewer like a coupon: 5 liters of barley beer, medium froth, thank you very much. One tablet pinned to a wall reads like a payroll slip. Names, well, symbols for names, are listed alongside daily grain and beer allowances. A young apprentice squints at the list, trying to memorize his portion. His stylus is tucked behind his ear like a pencil, and his forehead already bears the telltale smudge of a day full of calculations. And this isn't just local paperwork. Oh no. The temple has reach. You overhear a trader explaining his delivery of copper from the mountains, using another clay tablet to confirm his shipment. The tablet lists weights, dates, and even the names of gods invoked during the journey. You can't help but smile. Even back then, people liked to over-document a business trip. Outside, you see more storage buildings, rows of flat-roofed halls filled with wool, oil, and tools. Some of the goods are intended for offerings, but most are just circulating within the temple's economic orbit. Goods come in, get logged, then go out again as payment, trade, or redistribution. It's like a divine Costco. You even imagine a sleepy Mesopotamian voice whispering, "Welcome to Inanna's warehouse, where savings are sacred." The administrative complexity is stunning. The temple's bureaucracy rivals any modern office, minus the breakroom gossip and with significantly more incense. Clerks manage inventories, organize labor teams, track supply routes, and keep eyes on everything from brick rations to sheep counts. And the backbone of all this? Receipts. More receipts than anyone asked for, but exactly as many as the gods demanded. Historians still argue whether this centralized temple model helped or hindered economic innovation. Did it stifle free trade by controlling all resources, or did it stabilize society by ensuring fair distribution? The evidence, like everything in ancient Mesopotamia, is baked into tablets. Some say it was exploitative. Others see it as a surprisingly effective welfare system. You sit beneath a tall column, feeling the cool stone against your back. Somewhere, a worker sings softly while sweeping grain into sacks. You take out a smooth clay tablet and run your fingers across the dry surface. You imagine a scribe pressing a tiny mark, a little wedge representing you, your labor, your contribution to the divine economy. And you realize something important: these receipts weren't just about goods. They were about presence. Proof that you were here, that you gave, that you mattered. In a world where memory was fleeting and records faded with the wind, a clay tablet was permanence. A whisper into the future. A bell rings. Workers begin to file out of the compound, weary but fulfilled. You follow them under a sky streaked with fading gold, the wind warm against your face. The temple looms behind you, not just a place of worship, but the beating heart of ancient administration. And in your pocket, you imagine carrying a little receipt of your own, one wedge, one mark, quietly affirming, you were part of this. The sun dips low as you wander along the banks of the Euphrates, your sandals pressing softly into the damp, glittering mud. The day has cooled a little, and the soft whir of insects buzzes gently across the reeds. You pause for a moment to watch a fisherman toss a net into the current, one simple, ancient movement repeated thousands of times over thousands of years. But your mind isn't on fish tonight. It's still tangled up in receipts. Specifically, what happens when those receipts travel? You've reached the age of trade, my friend. And like everything else in Sumer, it's more complicated than it looks. See, the Sumerians weren't just hoarding grain for their temples. They were moving it, bartering, swapping, exporting, and building a network of trade routes that stretched far beyond their riverbanks. And wherever the goods went, the paperwork followed. Because if there's one thing more ancient than a merchant, it's a merchant who wants a return policy. You board a flat-bottomed cargo boat docked at a trading outpost. The deck is cluttered with bundles of textiles, baskets of dates, and sealed jugs of sesame oil. A crewman grunts a greeting and hands you a clay tablet, your bill of lading. Yes, even on a boat full of reeds and goats, somebody's keeping track of who owns what. This boat isn't just moving goods, it's moving contracts. And that's the big leap here. The Sumerians figured out that information didn't have to stay in one place. You could write a receipt, seal it, and send it downriver to someone you've never met. And they'd open it, read it, and trust it. Okay, mostly trust it. That's where the seals came in. Seals are a big deal. Think of them like ancient QR codes, but prettier. Every merchant, priest, and bureaucrat worth their barley had a cylinder seal, an intricately carved little roller that, when pressed into wet clay, left behind a unique image. Some seals showed lions, others gods, others processions of people doing very serious administrative things. It was your signature, your brand, your personal emoji in a world where ink hadn't been invented yet. You watch a trader seal a receipt by rolling his cylinder across a blob of clay that closes the tablet like a little envelope. No one could tamper with the tablet without breaking the seal. And if it arrived unbroken? You knew the contents were legit. Well, probably. Historians still argue whether seals were foolproof or just gave the illusion of security, sort of like those tamper-evident salad dressing bottles you still don't trust. As your boat glides past river villages and muddy banks, you catch glimpses of trade in motion. A group of men unload timber, likely from the distant forests of modern-day Lebanon. Further down, a dock receives gleaming hunks of lapis lazuli, a brilliant blue stone prized far beyond its mining source in Afghanistan. Imagine the supply chain spreadsheet for that journey. Step 1, don't lose the donkey. And every shipment, every crate and cargo sack, came with a matching record. Clay tablets traveled with the goods, often wrapped in clay envelopes that also held duplicate receipts. That's right, ancient Mesopotamians invented triplicate forms. Bureaucracy truly is eternal. Here's a quirky tidbit: sometimes these clay envelopes, called bulli, were themselves sealed with the sender's and the receiver's seals, and the enclosed tablet couldn't be read unless you broke the outer shell. One part Amazon package, one part escape room. By nightfall, you dock at a bustling port town. Lanterns flicker from doorways as merchants argue cheerfully over prices. In one dim courtyard, a group of traders sit cross-legged, passing around a tablet and a jug of date wine. They're reviewing a contract, an agreement over a wool shipment due to arrive in a fortnight. The tablet lists not just the amount, but also the delivery terms, penalties for delay, and even which god was invoked to curse anyone who breaks the deal. It's business with divine backup. Take that, modern notaries. And here's where the real magic of ancient receipts kicks in. They weren't just passive records anymore. They were active instruments of trust. A tablet could authorize a payment, initiate a trade, confirm delivery. It was a living part of the economy, not just paperwork, but paperwork. One particularly dramatic merchant tells a story about a lost shipment of copper ingots. His tablet, sealed and properly inscribed, survived the journey, but the goods didn't. So he used the tablet to file a claim. That's right. The world's first complaint form. Somewhere in the city's archives is a grumpy clay rectangle basically saying, "Dear Sir, where is my copper?" Historians still argue whether such tablets had real legal force outside temple settings. Some believe that once sealed by trusted parties, a tablet could serve as enforceable proof. Others argue that local customs mattered more, and that the tablet was only as strong as the muscle behind it. But the fact that they existed, that people kept them, referenced them, even resented them, tells you all you need to know. You stop by a scribe's booth on the edge of the market. He's older, wiry, his fingers blackened from years of handling inkless clay. He offers to write you a practice contract for a fake shipment. You accept. The tablet he presses into your hand reads, 1 jar of sesame oil, to be delivered by boat, upon the second moon, to the house of Lagash. If lost, the gods will know. And beneath it, his seal, a tiny winged lion chasing a gazelle. It's oddly comforting, this little block of earth. In your hands is proof of a transaction that never happened, recorded in a language no one speaks anymore, from a civilization buried under millennia of dust, and yet it feels real. Tangible. Like something that matters. You walk away under a sky now scattered with stars, clutching your tiny contract. The river whispers beside you, eternal and unchanged, carrying boats and hopes and crates of wool through the same bends it's followed since before history noticed. And on those boats? Receipts. Tiny clay promises, gliding forward through time. The next morning greets you with soft golden light creeping through woven reed blinds. You rise slowly, your muscles stiff from yesterday's boat ride, your thoughts still thick with seal impressions and trade routes. But today, your focus shifts again, this time from goods in motion to goods in dispute. Because as long as humans have written things down, they've also argued about what those things meant. And guess what solved that? More writing. You're headed to the city council court. Yes, even ancient Sumer had courtrooms, though they looked a little less law and order, and a lot more open-air gazebo. The plaza is alive with shouting, laughing, and the distinct sound of sandals slapping against sun-warmed stone. At the far end, under a canopy of date palms, a small group of elders sits on benches. They're the judges, respected men with gray-streaked beards, sharp eyes, and probably a deep love for receipts. You join a crowd gathered around a clay platform. 2 farmers are arguing over a missing shipment of sheep. The first man, red-faced and gesturing wildly, slams a clay tablet onto the platform. It's his receipt, proof that the sheep were handed over at the agreed time. The second man, less animated but no less determined, produces his own tablet, proof that the sheep arrived short by 3 heads. Each tablet carries seals, each written by different scribes. Now it's up to the council to interpret the fine print, well, the fine wedges. The scribes act as legal assistants. One carefully reads the cuneiform aloud, translating the wedge marks into a flowing speech. You catch phrases like, upon the 18th day of the moon of barley, and, sworn by the god Enlil. This isn't casual stuff. These are legal documents, meant to resolve very real disputes that, if left unchecked, could spiral into feuds, brawls, or worse, bad Yelp reviews, ancient edition. Historians still argue whether these courts served true justice or merely upheld the interests of the elite. After all, most judges were landowners or priests. But what's clear is that receipts were key. If you couldn't prove your claim in clay, your case might dissolve faster than a date cake in the rain. Here's a quirky little courtroom tidbit: sometimes, to avoid forgery, parties would memorize the shape and feel of a tablet. If someone tried to swap it with a fake, they'd recognize the texture, the seal depth, even the way it sat in the hand. Tablet fraud was real, and Sumerians took it seriously. Imagine testifying, "Your Honor, that wedge is way too shallow to be my barley log." Today's case ends in compromise. The second farmer will receive restitution in grain instead of sheep, and both parties nod reluctantly. The scribes log the result onto a fresh tablet, sealing it for the city's archive. And that brings you to another cornerstone of receipt culture, the archive system. You walk with one of the younger scribes, a boy barely taller than his stylus, down a corridor lined with low brick shelves. This is the local archive, a literal wall of clay memories. Each shelf holds dozens of tablets, sorted by type, grain, labor, animal transfers, legal cases, and even miscellaneous, which is probably just where someone shoved their to-do lists. One particular shelf catches your eye, it's filled with duplicate tablets. These are backups, redundant copies of important documents, because even clay breaks. The Sumerians were already practicing data redundancy 5,000 years ago. Somewhere, a modern IT manager just felt a warm tingle of pride. Some of the tablets are wrapped in additional clay, labeled with brief summaries. You pick one up and read, "Labor contract for brickmakers, Moon of Storms." Intrigued, you carefully open the outer shell, mentally, not literally, you're not that bold, and imagine the inner tablet, untouched for centuries, still holding the exact terms of someone's ancient job. Break a brick? Probably your problem. Take too many breaks? Definitely your problem. You turn to your young guide and ask about older cases. He perks up and leads you to a stone bin filled with retired records. These are cracked, worn, but still legible. One details a dispute over a marriage dowry, another lists a stolen donkey. And then there's a long, oddly poetic account of someone suing over spoiled beer. It includes phrases like, "The foam was weak" and "the vessel betrayed its purpose." You stifle a laugh. Even back then, people had opinions about bad drinks. Here's another peculiar twist: some temples acted as neutral grounds for storing receipts related to non-temple business. Need to log a contract without bias? Drop it off with the gods. They won't play favorites, except when they do, of course. Historians still argue whether this service was an attempt at impartiality or just another way for temples to insert themselves into everything. But hey, if it meant your sheep contract was safe from rats and relatives, it was probably worth the tithe. You notice that certain tablets have strange little notches along the edges. Your guide explains that these notches were used like filing tabs. Scribes would run their fingers along the rows and feel for the right cut pattern. Low-tech, but effective. Especially if you had 2,000 receipts and exactly 0 patience. Before leaving, you watch an older scribe burnish a fresh tablet, smoothing the surface for a new inscription. He dips his stylus into a bit of water and begins pressing the first marks, a date, a name, a product. You realize this isn't just routine. It's ritual. Writing a receipt was part of maintaining order. It meant that even in a chaotic world of floods, thefts, and goat shortages, someone was keeping track. You step outside into the sunlight, your eyes adjusting as the world sharpens back into color. A woman walks past you carrying a basket of lentils and a tiny tablet tucked under her arm. Somewhere nearby, 2 men haggle over an ox, one waving a receipt like a magic spell. This city runs on receipts. Not just economically, but socially. A receipt says, "I'm telling the truth." A receipt says, "We agreed on this." A receipt says, you can't just change history because it's convenient. And maybe that's the real legacy of all this clay. Not just the goods traded or the records stored, but the human need to be heard. To be believed. To put a mark in wet earth and say, "This happened. I was here." You wake to the muffled clatter of carts and distant braying, your ceiling made of reeds, your pillow probably a bag of barley. But the noise outside tells you something important: it's market day. Which means a fresh flood of receipts is about to be written, sealed, and possibly squabbled over. You stretch, rub the sleep from your eyes, and step out into the slow-burning morning haze of Sumerian commerce in action. The bazaar sprawls in every direction. Tents flap lazily in the hot breeze. Merchants yell out deals in rhythmic cadences. Someone juggles figs near the fish stall. And through all this, one figure stands out, moving deliberately, stylus behind his ear, clay board under his arm. He's a roaming scribe. The mobile notary, the pop-up accountant, the man you call when your goat deal needs paperwork but the temple's too far. You follow him. He stops beside two men crouched over a pile of onions. There's some serious haggling happening. One man wants a full bushel, the other insists the deal was for half. Voices rise, tempers flare, and just when it looks like someone's going to get beaned with a squash, the scribe steps in. He smooths a bit of clay, listens carefully, and starts writing, slow, practice strokes, recording the terms, the names, even the agreed punishment if one party fails to deliver. Spoiler, the gods are always part of the consequences. That's how widespread the receipt culture has become. It's not just for temple grain or elite shipments anymore. It's for lentils. For onions. For marriages and mule rentals and borrowed jars of honey. If you can trade it, you can track it. And in a world without paper, ink, or copy machines, that's no small feat. You pass a group of children playing merchant, one pretending to sell wool, the other pretending to tally payments on a flat stone with a stick. Early role-playing, Sumer style. Their parents probably dream of them becoming temple scribes one day, a solid career with benefits like shelter, influence, and lots of opportunities to write passive-aggressive notes in cuneiform. You duck into a shady alcove to watch another negotiation. This time, a woman is trading dyed textiles for fermented fish paste. Glamorous, right? But she insists on a tablet. She's had deals go bad before. The scribe nods, and as he presses the symbols into the clay, she holds up a tiny cylinder seal. It's beautifully carved, a spiral pattern with miniature goats leaping over waves. She rolls it over the damp surface, sealing the deal, quite literally. Seals like this were often passed down in families, becoming as personal and important as your name. Some even served as status symbols. The more detailed your seal, the more likely people were to take your contract seriously. Historians still argue whether these seals functioned more like personal IDs or like modern credit scores, but one thing's clear, they meant business. Here's a quirky fact you'll enjoy. One clay tablet was discovered in which a sheep trading contract had two seals squeezed onto it, followed by a third that appears to be a child's toy imprint. Possibly a baby sibling wandered in and signed the family's major business deal with a duck-shaped rattle. For historians, it's priceless. For the buyer, probably a nightmare. Moving deeper into the market, you see receipts evolve again, into what might be the ancient version of a spreadsheet. Multiple rows of transactions, each line item carefully separated with wedge-shaped dividers. It's not just about proving a single trade anymore. It's about aggregating data. Who owes what? Who paid? When? How much? Welcome to the age of Sumerian ledgers. One particularly large tablet lists dozens of grain deliveries to the temple over a lunar month. You imagine a stressed-out administrator balancing this slab on his knees, muttering about barley quotas while drinking weak beer and pretending not to cry. The work was unglamorous, but essential. Without it, temples couldn't ration supplies. Cities couldn't plan harvests. And farmers couldn't prove they'd paid their taxes. Yes, taxes. That old favorite. The Sumerians had them, and surprise. They tracked them obsessively. You spot a man arguing with a collection officer about a discrepancy. The officer holds a cracked clay slab while the man insists he paid in full 2 moons ago. A second scribe is summoned. More tablets are produced. It turns out someone accidentally recorded the payment under the wrong name. Easily done. given that half the population is named, you are something. Still, the man's record holds, thanks to his tablet and seal. Crisis averted. Goat saved. You pause for a moment to consider how all of this, every trade, every argument, every receipt, is rooted in trust. Not just trust in people, but in the system. In the tablets. In the idea that clay plus wedge marks plus seal equals truth. It's deeply human, this urge to document, to verify, to lock our fleeting agreements into something solid. You take a short detour to a temple annex, where scribes are working on more complex accounts. One tablet includes a beautiful touch, a line of poetic flourish added by the scribe at the bottom, something like, "Let this record be as firm as the city walls, and as lasting as the river's voice." Honestly, if your accountant wrote like this, you'd read every email he ever sent. Historians still argue whether the poetic additions had legal standing or were just stylistic flair. But they reflect how seriously scribes took their work, not just as functionaries, but as keepers of a sacred craft. Writing wasn't just a tool. It was a ritual, an honor, and sometimes, a flex. You step back into the sun, blinking. The market's winding down, the smell of roasted garlic and baked barley wafting over the alleys. You pass a young couple giggling as they hand a scribe a small clay tablet, your ears catch the words, engagement dowry, and 2 jars of wine. Love, sealed in clay. Adorable and binding. Everywhere you look, people are shaping their lives into tablets. Love and taxes. Wool and onions. Fines, debts, promises. The receipts pile up, not just in archives but in homes, pockets, and memories. And somewhere in that mountain of clay is the story of an entire civilization, documented, dated, and dutifully filed. As the sun climbs higher, you find yourself drawn toward a quieter part of the city, where the scribe's quarter sprawls like a small village inside the larger one. Narrow alleys lead past mud brick buildings with low doorways and benches scattered outside, where scribes sharpen their styluses or practice their cuneiform strokes on scraps of clay. The air smells faintly of wet mud and fresh ink, or as fresh as wet clay can smell. You follow a young apprentice scribe who invites you inside a tiny, dimly lit room, its walls lined with shelves stacked high with tablets. This is a scribe's workshop, where history, business, and daily life all converge into wedge-shaped symbols pressed into soft clay. Scribes here are the invisible backbone of the Sumerian economy. Without them, receipts would be nothing more than vague promises whispered on the wind. They transform spoken agreements into permanent records. You watch as the apprentice picks up a damp clay tablet and gently presses his stylus into it, forming neat lines of wedge marks. His movements are precise but fluid, as if writing a secret language only a select few truly understand. You learn that scribes had a rigorous training path, starting from childhood. Memorizing hundreds of signs, mastering grammar, learning formulas for contracts, and even poetry. It's a demanding life, but one with prestige and job security in a world where literacy was a rare skill. Here's a curious detail: some scribes specialized in specific types of documents. There were those who handled temple accounts, others who recorded commercial transactions, and a rare few trained in legal matters. Apprentices were often assigned to one area and spent years perfecting their craft. It's a bit like picking a major at university, but instead of psychology or economics, you choose to become a master of sheep receipts. You sit beside the apprentice as he explains the evolution of writing tools. Early on, scribes used simple reeds, but over time, they developed styluses with triangular tips to create the characteristic wedge shapes. Each wedge's angle and depth conveyed different meanings. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of font styles or emojis, but far more functional and, let's face it, cooler. Sumerian writing wasn't just utilitarian. Sometimes, scribes included little doodles or decorative marks, like a scribe's signature flourish. Historians still debate whether these marks served a purely artistic purpose or had secret meanings lost to time. One tablet even sports a tiny sketch of a cat chasing a mouse, possibly the earliest known example of office humor. As you lean in to examine the apprentice's current work, he reveals it's a receipt for barley delivered to a local brewer. The tablet lists the quantity, delivery date, the brewer's name, and even a clause specifying that the barley should not be used for bread. It's fascinating how detailed these contracts could be, anticipating potential disputes with remarkable foresight. One tablet you notice includes a note that the barley was blessed by the goddess Ninkasi, patron of brewing. Invoking divine protection was common practice. If the contract was broken, the gods were called to bear witness and enforce justice. Temples often served as notaries, providing a divine seal of approval. It's like having your contract co-signed by a celebrity, but one who might smite you if you cheat. You glance around and spot a worn tablet describing a delivery dispute settled with a peace offering of sheep and beer. It's clear that receipts weren't just cold records, they played a vital role in maintaining social harmony. The written word was a bridge between people, smoothing over conflicts before they escalated. You watch the apprentice carefully seal his tablet with his personal cylinder seal, a finely carved symbol featuring a serpent entwined around a staff. It's unique to him, a mark of his identity and authority. Seal carving was an art form, and skilled seal makers were prized craftsmen. Interestingly, some seals also carried magical significance. They were believed to protect documents from evil spirits or curses. If you lost your seal, it was considered a serious problem, like losing your house keys or smartphone today. Historians still debate whether these beliefs were genuine or ritualistic tradition, but the importance of seals is undeniable. The apprentice hands you a tablet to hold, freshly stamped and warm from the sun. It feels solid and important, a tangible connection to a world that existed millennia before. You realize how much trust, skill, and care went into each receipt, turning fleeting deals into permanent history. You step outside into the afternoon heat, the scribes' voices and clatter fading behind you. Around you, the city hums with activity, but somewhere within its mud-brick heart lies a quiet reverence for the written word, small clay tablets bearing witness to everyday lives, forever etched in history. The afternoon sunlight softens as you wander toward the temple district, where the towering ziggurat casts a long shadow over the city's heart. This isn't just a place of worship, it's a hub of administration, economy, and record-keeping. You're about to witness how receipts weave into the very fabric of Sumerian spiritual and political life. The temple complex bustles with activity, priests in flowing robes chant prayers, laborers haul baskets of grain, and scribes scurry between rooms clutching tablets like precious scrolls. This is where the gods and commerce meet, where human transactions are consecrated in clay. You enter a cool stone chamber filled with shelves of tablets, some stacked neatly, others piled haphazardly as if in mid-crisis. This is the temple archive, a veritable treasury of receipts, contracts, and inventories. Here, every barley kernel, every lamb sacrificed, every silver shekel paid in tax is meticulously logged. You learn that temples functioned as banks, warehouses, and courts all in one. They collected taxes, stored goods, and redistributed resources to the community. Receipts here weren't just proofs of payment, they were sacred documents ensuring divine order. One tablet details a large grain shipment dedicated to the goddess Inanna. It records the exact amount, the donor's name, and even a prayer asking for her blessing. This blend of commerce and piety fascinates you. In Sumeria, business wasn't just about profit, it was a divine duty. Priests often acted as scribes, and their training included religious texts alongside commercial records. The act of writing was itself a ritual, a way of honoring the gods by bringing order to chaos. Some tablets even carried blessings or curses, warning that anyone tampering with the records would suffer divine retribution. Talk about contract enforcement. You observe a priest carefully rolling his cylinder seal over a freshly inscribed tablet, the image of a lion-headed eagle leaving its mark. This seal represented the temple's authority, a divine imprimatur that made the receipt official. Here's a quirky detail: one tablet includes a humorous curse against thieves, promising that the culprit's nose would wither like a dried figure. Despite the severity, these curses reveal a human side, a mix of frustration, hope, and superstition. Historians still argue how much power temples held over daily life. Were they benevolent caretakers or bureaucratic overlords? Either way, their archives were crucial for preserving order in an otherwise chaotic world. You notice the intricate system for categorizing tablets, with small clay tags indicating content type and date. This early filing system resembles a librarian's dream, or a hoarder's nightmare. Before you leave, a priest shares a story about a tablet recording a dispute over temple land, settled by divine judgment. The case included detailed receipts of sacrifices made to appease the gods and restore harmony. It's a vivid reminder of how intertwined spirituality and paperwork were. Stepping back into the fading light, you reflect on the temple's role, not just as a house of gods, but as the keeper of truth, memory, and justice, all preserved in countless clay receipts. You drift into the late afternoon, the golden sun casting long, sleepy shadows across the city's dusty streets. It's the perfect time to explore how Sumerian receipts didn't just record transactions but also shaped social relationships, kind of like an ancient Facebook timeline, but in clay. In Sumerian society, deals and debts weren't purely economic, they were personal, emotional, and sometimes downright complicated. Family, friendship, and politics all played roles in who owed what, and how those debts were repaid or forgiven. You follow a procession heading toward a large courtyard where a public reading is about to take place. Here, a scribe stands on a raised platform, reading aloud from a giant tablet listing debts owed to the city's temple and the names of those who have paid up. The crowd listens with rapt attention, some nodding in approval, others grimacing as their debts are publicly announced. Nothing like a little social pressure to keep people honest. Public debt announcements were common, serving both as reminders and warnings. They reinforced community trust and accountability. Imagine if your entire social media feed was just a series of receipts and IOUs, awkward, right? Debt forgiveness was also a thing. The Sumerian rulers occasionally declared a jubilee, a mass cancellation of debts to reset the social order. These were both pragmatic and political moves to prevent unrest. Historians still debate how often these jubilees happened or how effective they were. Some think they were idealized promises rather than regular practice. One tablet you spot describes a jubilee decree by King Shulgi, which not only cancelled debts but also returned lands to dispossessed families. This document feels like an ancient reset button, showing that even 4,000 years ago, leaders knew the value of starting fresh. You overhear a merchant telling a story about a debt dispute settled by a marriage alliance. A young woman's dowry was used to clear her family's debts, proof that receipts were deeply woven into personal and political lives. Marriage contracts often came with detailed receipts documenting dowries and future obligations, blending love and ledger. Here's a quirky tidbit: some receipts recorded gifts given during festivals, which doubled as social investments. Giving generously could improve your social standing, essentially buying goodwill. It's the ancient version of liking someone's Instagram post, but with barley and beer. You wander into a smaller alley where a scribe is working on a tablet that records a complicated multi-party debt. Several families owe varying amounts, with interest calculated in barley and even chickens. The tablet looks like an ancient spreadsheet, complete with columns and totals. You can almost hear the scribe sighing as he tries to keep it all straight. It's clear that receipts functioned as more than mere proofs of transaction, they were tools for maintaining social order. They recorded favors, debts, alliances, and obligations, making relationships transparent and enforceable. Without them, social chaos would probably reign. In the dim light, you notice a faded tablet with a heartfelt inscription: "Let this record bind us in trust, not in chains." It's a reminder that these documents were meant to build community, not break it. As the crowd disperses and the evening cools, you reflect on the delicate balance between economics and empathy that Sumerian receipts managed. They were practical tools but also carriers of human stories, stories of trust, betrayal, generosity, and survival. The evening air cools as you stroll through Sumer's winding streets, the scent of baked bread mingling with the faint aroma of date syrup. Tonight, your curiosity pulls you toward the role of women in the world of receipts and record-keeping, a chapter often shadowed in history but vital nonetheless. Contrary to what you might expect, women were far from invisible in Sumerian commerce. You find evidence in tablets where women appear as buyers, sellers, and lenders. Some even acted as scribes themselves, wielding stylus and clay with the same authority as their male counterparts. It's a quiet but powerful reminder that literacy and business acumen weren't exclusively male domains. You enter a bustling workshop where a female scribe guides a group of apprentices. Her hands move confidently, impressing wedge marks with practiced ease. She explains that some women managed family estates or operated taverns, making receipts essential to their livelihoods. These records helped women secure legal rights and protect their property. One intriguing tablet details a contract for the sale of a slave woman, signed by the seller, buyer, and a female witness. The presence of women as witnesses illustrates their role in upholding the law, a responsibility sometimes overlooked in popular accounts of ancient societies. Here's a quirky nugget. One tablet includes a humorous clause allowing a woman to reclaim her dowry if her husband failed to pay debts incurred during their marriage. It's like an ancient prenup with a built-in get-out-of-debt card. Historians still argue the extent to which women controlled wealth versus merely managing it on behalf of male relatives. But these receipts show women's active participation in economic life and their use of writing to assert rights. You sit beside the female scribe as she recounts a story about a widow who used a series of receipts to reclaim her family's land after her husband's death. Thanks to careful record-keeping, she was able to fend off relatives trying to claim the property. It's a testament to how receipts empowered individuals, especially women, to navigate legal complexities. Nearby, you spot a tablet recording the rental of a donkey for a trading journey, signed by a woman leasing the animal. It's a reminder that commerce wasn't confined to marketplaces or temples but also involved everyday transactions in homes and farms. You glance at a small tablet inscribed with a list of ingredients for a medicinal recipe attributed to a woman healer. While not a receipt in the traditional sense, it demonstrates how writing extended beyond trade into health and knowledge, realms where women often played central roles. Before you leave, the scribe rolls her cylinder seal, a delicate image of a goddess with outstretched wings, onto a tablet. It's a subtle but powerful symbol of feminine authority, blending divine protection with earthly contracts. As night deepens, you reflect on how Sumerian receipts reveal women's vital contributions to economic and social life. Far from silent, they used clay and stylus to claim space in a world often portrayed as male-dominated, reminding us that history is richer and more complex than we sometimes imagine. The night deepens and the city quiets, but you find yourself drawn to stories about Sumerian trade beyond the city walls, how those humble clay receipts traveled far and wide, connecting distant peoples and cultures. Imagine tiny tablets acting as the ancient internet, sending proof of deals across deserts and rivers. You follow the trail of merchants who braved long journeys along the Euphrates and beyond, carrying goods like wool, oil, copper, and precious stones. Each trade expedition was accompanied by a stack of receipts, essential for keeping track of complex deals and ensuring payment once they returned. You discover that Sumerians traded not only with nearby regions but also as far as the Indus Valley and Anatolia. These cross-cultural exchanges were messy and complicated, involving multiple languages and currencies. Receipts became essential tools for translating trust between strangers. One fascinating tablet records a shipment of timber from the Cedar Mountains of Lebanon, a rare and prized resource for Sumer, which lacked its own forests. The tablet details the quantity, the trader's name, and the agreed price. This receipt serves as a passport of sorts, verifying the shipment's legitimacy. Merchants often carried portable seal stamps, much like passports or business cards, which they used to authenticate receipts on the go. You imagine a merchant in a dusty caravan, carefully pressing his seal onto damp clay, hoping the tablet would survive the journey intact. Here's a quirky fact: some merchants included tiny clay tokens inside sealed envelopes attached to receipts. These tokens represented the goods themselves, like a 3D barcode for ancient trade. Tokens and receipts together formed a complex system of accounting and verification. Historians still argue about how standardized these trade receipts were across cultures. Some suggest the system was surprisingly uniform, while others think variations created confusion and mistrust. Either way, these documents were vital to the emerging global economy. You visit a merchant's lodge where traders gather to exchange goods and information. The walls are decorated with maps etched on clay tablets, showing trade routes and market towns. The receipts pinned alongside them tell stories of success, failure, and negotiation. One tablet humorously records a dispute over camels, who was responsible for feeding them during the journey and who should pay for lost animals. It's a reminder that ancient trade had its own terms and conditions, complete with fine print and, occasionally, bad reviews. You overhear traders joking about the perils of long-distance trade, sandstorms, bandits, and unpredictable river currents. Receipts helped mitigate risks, documenting responsibilities and deadlines. They were as much about trust as about numbers. As you watch the sun rise, illuminating the caravan preparing to depart, you realize that these tiny tablets were more than business records, they were lifelines connecting cultures, economies, and human stories across vast distances. The city now sleeps beneath a blanket of stars, but your journey continues into the shadowy world of Sumerian bureaucracy, the less glamorous but utterly essential system that kept the empire ticking. Here, receipts weren't just about merchants or temples, they were the nuts and bolts of government administration. You find yourself in a large hall where officials gather around long tables covered in tablets, tallying taxes, grain distributions, and labor quotas. The air is thick with the scent of ink and sweat, the rhythmic tapping of styluses on clay creating a hypnotic soundtrack. Taxation was the engine powering Sumer's prosperity, and receipts played a critical role in documenting who paid what, when, and how. Farmers, craftsmen, and traders alike had their contributions recorded in these clay ledgers. Without receipts, tax collection would be a chaotic guessing game. You watch a tax official carefully verifying a tablet recording a farmer's payment in barley. It lists exact amounts, dates, and even penalties for late payments. The precision here is impressive, no room for, "my dog ate my receipt," excuses. Interestingly, some receipts include bonuses or incentives. For example, farmers who paid early might receive additional seed grain for planting. It's a pragmatic approach to encourage timely compliance, a kind of ancient, early bird special. Historians still debate how fair or effective Sumerian taxation was. Some argue it was oppressive, fueling social unrest, while others see it as a necessary mechanism for public projects like irrigation and defense. Either way, receipts were the currency of accountability. You spot a tablet recording labor service obligations, citizens assigned to work on city walls, canals, or temple construction. Receipts here served as proof that duties were fulfilled, preventing disputes over unpaid labor. It's a glimpse into the early welfare system of sorts. A quirky detail, one tablet humorously notes a worker's excuse for missing duty: a goat stole his sandals. Whether true or not, it humanizes the bureaucratic grind and reminds you that even 4,000 years ago, people found creative ways to skip work. Cylinder seals come into play again, authenticating official documents with unique impressions. Losing a seal was serious business, akin to misplacing your ID or security badge today. The fear of fraud was very real, and the system was designed to prevent it. You watch as scribes cross-reference multiple tablets to reconcile accounts, demonstrating a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of bookkeeping and audit control. It's the dawn of accounting as a profession. As dawn breaks, you leave the bureaucrats to their endless calculations, struck by how these mundane records, receipts, labor logs, tax ledgers, were foundational to civilization's growth. They turned chaos into order, speculation into certainty, and human effort into a shared legacy. The first light of dawn gently filters through the city, softening the sharp edges of clay tablets piled high on dusty shelves. You find yourself reflecting on the legacy of these ancient receipts, not just as dry records, but as the quiet, powerful ancestors of everything from your grocery bill to online payment confirmations. Sumer's invention of receipts was a small but seismic shift in human history. By turning transactions into tangible, lasting proof, they laid the groundwork for trust in trade, law, and governance. You can almost hear the scribe's styluses tapping away, setting the rhythm for millennia of record-keeping to come. These tablets reveal a world where writing was sacred, commerce was communal, and even the most mundane exchanges were charged with meaning. From the bustling temple archives to remote trading caravans, receipts connected people across time and space, building networks of accountability and cooperation. You recall the stories: priests sanctifying payments, women asserting rights through contracts, merchants bridging continents with clay passports, and bureaucrats balancing the empire's books with unwavering precision. Each receipt was a snapshot of a life, a deal, or a dream, small pieces of a vast human puzzle. Historians still argue about the exact origins and nuances of these practices, but there's no doubt their impact echoes in today's world, from bank statements to blockchain ledgers. They remind us that behind every transaction is a story, and behind every story is a human desire to be seen, remembered, and trusted. As you close this chapter and prepare to drift off, you imagine the ancient scribes, silent witnesses to humanity's first steps into complexity, patience, and order. Their work was humble, but it shaped the future in ways they could never have foreseen. Now, as your own eyes grow heavy, remember, those tiny tablets of clay were more than receipts, they were the first threads in the vast tapestry of human connection.